Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. My name is Vadim Perlovsky, and I'm excited to welcome Andrew Mustard of GlenAllachie Distillery. As always, huge thanks to Sam Filmus for helping set these up. Impex Beverages has been a longstanding partner of Virtual Tasting Society, helping us put together tastings with their amazing brands. They are an importer that imports some of our favorite brands. So we're excited to feature we did GlenAllachie a year or two ago, and we're happy to have you guys back. So thank you very much for spending the evening with us. I know it's middle of the night in Scotland, and happy birthday, Andrew. Thank you for making the time for us. We're happy to have you. We have six amazing new and interesting expressions of GlenAllachie in front of us, but we'll get into all that. So all that said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the participants, all the attendees. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you for joining us tonight and spending the evening with us. But all that said, you're not here to listen to me talk. I want to pass it over to Andrew and Sam. If you want to say anything at all, I want to pass it over to you guys.
Cool. Well, yeah, Sam, if you're happy, I'm happy to get things kind of kicked off. So yeah, I would just say maybe with the lineup, obviously the first whiskey Sam has written is the GlenAllachie 8-year-old. There's just thought just last minute there'll be a bit of a change, but I'll let you know. There'll be I think a change between 3 and 4, but I'll give you guys a heads up beforehand. So yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks Vadim and Sam for kind of organising it, putting it on, and you guys for joining in. But also during the session, if you guys have, before we get going, if you guys have any questions or feedback, stick it in the comments, raise your hands, do whatever. These things are always great to be as interactive as they are, or as they can be. So yeah, feedback, comments, questions are as welcome as anything. As Vadim said at the start, you're not here just to listen to one person speak, but I'm also here to get your guys' questions and feedback as well. So as we get going, there's a question there for first whiskey. So it's the regular GlenAllachie 8-year-old, so 46% ABV. I would say, yeah, with us at GlenAllachie, I think the running order will just be a little bit of a background of us at where we are, what we're doing, where we're kind of what we're trying to do, where we're trying to kind of go. Yeah, I'm sure some of you guys may have tried GlenAllachie before, which is great. Some of you guys may be newer to the brand, but again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So no, with me, my name is Andrew Mustard. I'm the GlenAllachie sales manager for the distillery. So I used to actually work at the distillery, be based on site. I'm from Speyside originally, and I got brought up in the region, kind of whiskey on my doorstep, and growing up there, you kind of take it for granted, but I've always had an interest in industry. That led me to university, did a distilling degree at Heriot Watt, and then after that, I joined GlenAllachie. After that, working on the production side of things, which was great. Really gave me an understanding about what we do behind the scenes, but also gave me an understanding about what really every distillery does behind the scenes, what goes on, and really sees almost the magic that goes into creating kind of any whiskey. And that brings us nicely onto our number one whiskey today, which is our GlenAllachie 8-year-old. So if you've not done so already, please pick it up, give it a nose, give it a taste. Initially, see what you think, and I'll talk to you a couple of minutes just about it.
Andrew, so a lot of us have six glasses in front of us, and we like to nose them side by side. Well, can you
Cool.
just tell us the order we're going to pour them in, so we just have them already lined up?
Cool. No, exactly. So number one will be the GlenAllachie 8-year-old. And then number two is the Scottish Virgin Oak. Number three will be the Hungarian Virgin Oak. 4 is the Cuvée. 5 is the 15-year-old, and 6 is the single cask. Yeah.
You guys put out such amazing releases. It's so hard to pick six.
No,
Very,
exactly.
very Sophie's choice here. This was a
Yeah.
hard pick. The 13-year Madeira cask that Impex had
It's
brought
great.
in, their pick was just spectacular.
No, it's very nice. It's good. It's really good. But no, just with this, I mean the lineup as you guys get going nosing in the first glass, by all means, I was good to say actually, Vadim, but nose the different glasses as we're going on, and if you're able to leave a little bit kind of in the glass and go back and taste it and see what you think, as it's amazing how things can change over time, and maybe you pick up different notes as your palate develops. And I mean, after 6 whiskies, I'm sure we'll all be picking up maybe slightly different things. Our palates maybe a bit kind of skewed, but that's kind of part of the fun. But no, this first one is our GlenAllachie 8-year-old. This is part of our core range. This is really, it's meant to showcase really what GlenAllachie really is about. And I actually think this as an 8 is, I mean, it punches well above its weight. And the notes that you pick up from this, it's a classic kind of Speyside sherried whiskey. So with this 46% ABV, that's the minimum that we will ever bottle at. So non-chill filtered, non-added color. And this one is matured. It's matured for about 6 years in ex-bourbon. And then after that, we re-rack it and put it into different styles of sherry. So there's a large proportion of Pedro Jimenez Oloroso sherry, and then smaller amounts of maybe 10% of American virgin oak casks, and then a small amount of Rioja red wine casks. So in here, yeah, you're getting those classic, to me, your classic Speyside sherry notes as I talk about. So I'm going to say your vanilla coming in from the bourbon, a bit of your raisins, mocha, chocolate coming in there, a bit of sweetness. But also to me, there's a really nice bit of, yeah, I would say spiciness there, but in a nice way. Your kind of ginger, cinnamon, very much on the finish, and that's coming from, I would say, the influence of those virgin oak casks, but also of the youthness of the spirit. So yeah, this is just a great introduction to what we do at GlenAllachie. Some people may say, well, why is it 8? Why is it not 10? Why is it not 12? Obviously, we've got that as part of our core range. And yeah, with us, as I said, everything that we do is kind of minimum 46% ABV, non-chill filtered, no added color. Yeah, we're just trying to be as transparent as possible with everything that we do. So everything that we have will have an age statement on the bottle as well. So no matter if it's 4 years old or 35 years old, there'll be an age statement there. We're not trying to hide anything from the consumer, which some people think is maybe tricky. But no, if it's ready, we're happy to stick it, kind of bottle it, and stick it into the bottle, and you to enjoy it in your glass. See, there's a question there. So these are funny question there. We could probably talk all night, all morning about what is seasoning or what is a kind of finished cask for sherry. These are, when we buy our sherry cask from bodegas in Jerez, obviously in south of Spain, the sherry that is used in these casks will be matured for a minimum of 18 months to 24 years. So some of your sherry purists would say, oh, that is sherry finishing. But to me, it's more than that. Obviously, nowadays, a lot less sherry is drunk kind of around the world. So there's not enough whiskey drank there's not enough sherry drank to supply the whiskey industry. So obviously, there's a huge amount of sherry casks that are seasoned, but we call these kind of a flash in the pan job. Some low grade, not a kick to them. A low grade sherry liquid will be put into a cask. It will be almost washed around. The sherry or so-called sherry will be kind of ditched out and probably be put down a drain, and then that is then classed as a sherry cask. With us, 100% of the sherry that is used in our seasoning or finishing is used in the industry, which is that's testament to the quality that we're using, and that's something that we'll kind of touch on as we go on tonight about the quality of our casks and our wood management that we're using. So, no, with this one, I mean, I'm sure some of you guys may have enjoyed our 12-year-old or 15-year-old, which are both at 46. We've got our 15 later on. But this one, yeah, for an 8-year-old, it's our newest addition to our core range, and I think it punches well above its weight. You run the risk of this maybe between being kind of too young, maybe not ready, and that's when you're going to get your notes of ethanol coming in on the nose and on the finish. And I'm sure we've all tried whiskey spirits where that's the main notes that you're getting, and I mean, that's what you're wanting to pick up, cheap and cheerful. That's by all means, that's good for you, but if you're buying an age statement sherry single malt, you're not wanting those burning alcoholic ethanol notes at all. So yeah, I think this one is no, is a nice one to start off the evening, I would say. But also go back to it as we move on and see what else you pick up. And yeah, I just saw another comment there actually. All these whiskies are bottled at an ABV where we think they're comfortable to be drank at, sort of natural, neat, if you like. But that said, if you have your whiskey with a drop of water, if you have your whiskey with a block of ice, by all means, I'm not here to dictate and tell you what you can and can't do. So if you feel it needs something, by all means, go and do that. I'm not here to tell you what you can and can't do. But also on that front, I would say, even if you've got a cask strength whiskey, give that a try beforehand without the water. And then even if you're enjoying it, a couple drops of water, it's not going to damage and ruin the whiskey, but it really can sometimes almost open it up, I would say. So yeah, actually got an ex-colleague of mine who used to like to drink his whiskey with Dr. Pepper. So I would say by all means, please don't go ahead and do that. I don't want to see any Dr. Pepper bottles or lemonade bottles on screen. So if you do that, just turn your camera off. Um, so no, as you're enjoying hopefully that first whiskey, and before we kind of move on, I'll just tell you a little bit about the distillery. Really, as I said, we're in the heart of Speyside. The distillery itself was built in the 1960s, 1967. It was founded, and it was founded by a company called Scottish and Newcastle, who were big players in the British kind of beer ale industry. The industry in the 60s was there was a bit of a boom phase, and then a lot of companies wanted to get into the business. They thought, oh, you just build a distillery, you can make money, and that was it. You sell your whiskey. So this company over-engineered the site in the heart of Speyside. So we're maybe less than a mile outside of Aberlour. So on the doorstep, we've got your Aberlour distillery across the river. You've got your Macallan, your Glenlivet, Balvenie. Yeah, so we're right in the mix of it all. Glenfarclas. Um, the distillery itself was built to produce. It has the capacity to produce upwards of 4 million litres of alcohol, which even nowadays is pretty substantial. 1960s, it's a big site. And up until 2017, the distillery, it changed hands a couple of times. It used to be owned by Pernod Ricard Chivas Brothers, and really 99% of what they were producing was going into big blends. So your Chivas Regal, your Ballantines, Clan Campbell was an old blend. Stock was sold in the industry to kind of many other blends as well. So maybe some of you here pre-2017, you'd never had a GlenAllachie single malt before, but you'd have had a whiskey in a blend that would have contained kind of GlenAllachie in there. So as I said, 99% was put into blends. There's maybe 1% was sold into the industry for independent bottlers. So Gordon MacPhail, Berry Brothers, Murray McDavid, they have had releases in the past of GlenAllachie Spirit, and they may still have releases of GlenAllachie Spirit. But this is all pre Billy Walker, kind of 2017. And then the chance came along for us to acquire the distillery in 2017 and turn the distillery into the single malt brand it is today. And that was actually really exciting. It's actually quite rare to gain access to a distillery site, but also gain access to the maturing stock inventory. So we got access to 50,000 casks of stock dating back to 1978. And that kind of gave us a blank canvas of what we wanted to do and what we wanted to use, which is quite exciting. So yeah, gentlemen, that I'll touch on as the evening goes on. Billy Walker he's a bit of an icon in the world of whiskey, not just Scotch whiskey, and he got the chance to acquire the distillery from Pernod Ricard. He is most well known for, before GlenAllachie, he brought back to life. Vadim is modelling one of his old brands perfectly. The Glendronach, Balvenie, and Benriach and Glenglassaugh distilleries. He really got these distilleries, got the chance to buy these in the early 2000s when the whiskey industry was taking a bit of a downturn, he managed to get access to these sites and bring them back to life. And yeah, fast forward to 2016, he was getting on great. He had a workforce of over 200 people. He had 3 distilleries. He had a bottling hall. And then knocking the door came along from Brown-Forman, obviously a big American multinational corporation. They said they would like to buy the company. Billy said, it's not for sale. This went back and forward, back and forward. And yeah, there's a check offered for £285 million. So I think like any of us in this room, it was, yeah, there was a handshake and that was done. So, but at that stage in 2016, Billy was, he was 72 years old, and I think again, like any of us in this room, you may decide to maybe scale back a little bit, maybe not look to retire, but maybe yeah, enjoy yourself a little bit more. But within a couple of months, Billy was in discussions with yeah, with Pernod, with Chivas, about acquiring GlenAllachie, and he was happy to go again. And yeah, now we're in 2025. Billy's turning 80 next month, and he is still in the office or at the distillery all day, every day. Which is actually a testament to him, but it's great. It's great for me to get the chance to work alongside him. It's great for the whole industry, for you guys to still have somebody like Billy to have his expertise still working in the industry. And he's not showing any signs of slowing down at all. And yet, as you guys said, whiskey's the liquid of life, so it keeps him young, I think. So, but no, it's great to have Billy's expertise. Billy he's a chemist by trade. He studied chemistry at the University of Glasgow. He actually worked in pharmaceuticals for a couple of years, and then he joined the whiskey industry. So he's come into the industry with a really scientific background. But there's that whole debate again. We could talk at length about whether whiskey making, is it an art, is it a science? And I definitely think it's a bit of both. The science can maybe reiterate what the art is telling you. So nowadays, I think to become a blender, you can't just become a blender overnight. You can become a blender by studying a university degree and reading a few textbooks and looking at videos online. The best way to learn and understand a distillery is by going on site and by sampling and looking at your casks and working out exactly what you want to do, and also, I would say, understanding your palate as well. And because everyone's different, every palate is completely different. So that with me really on site, I used to work on the production side of things, and that was great because you're part of the sampling team. The sampling's got a bit of a bad reputation in the industry because people think of it as a pretty boring same job that's quite labor intensive, but actually I loved it because you got to really see exactly what the magic that's happening inside the cask, and seeing how you could have 2 casks sitting in the warehouse that have come from the same bodega, that have had the same whiskey put into it on the same date, and you see the differences that are there. And there's no rhyme or reason about how that's happened, but it's up to us to really work out and understand the changes that are happening, and to make sure that everything is maturing in kind of the best way possible. And yeah, that's why we say the whiskey tells us when it's ready, instead of us having a spreadsheet, or us having a computer system for us to tell the whiskey when it's ready. And I think that's actually, it's quite nice, and it's quite different. And I mean, with us being part of the Impex portfolio with Sam and the team, all the distilleries there kind of follow that kind of philosophy, kind of being a bit smaller, more independent. We are able to make these changes and decisions, instead of us being dictated by a big kind of multinational kind of boards of directors telling us exactly what we can and can't do. But yeah, that brings us nicely, I would say, to whiskey number 2, which is again, another 8-year-old. This is a Scottish Virgin Oak this time. So yeah, pick this one up, give it a nose, give it a taste, and see what you think on this one. This one's slightly higher ABV. This is 48%. And yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit. Also, I would say if you want to pick up whiskey number 3, which is the 7 Hungarian, give that a nose and taste. Maybe compare the two of these almost together, and just see what differences you're picking up there. As I find these two kind of really, really interesting, but also it's really interesting to see the differences between the first whiskey and this one, both 8 years old. just 2% ABV kind of difference in there, and it's really, yeah, really interesting to see the differences of the cask kind of influence there. So I would say while you are, yeah, nosing, tasting that whiskey number two, see there's a question there from Matt about, yeah, does Billy have any distilleries he'd recommend along the lines of GlenAllachie? Obviously, yeah, he's biased. I'm obviously here to talk to you about GlenAllachie, but I'm not. I'd be lying to you if I said, and we said as a company, there's not fantastic whiskies kind of out there. I know Billy has a soft spot for his previous distilleries he's worked on. I know he's got a huge soft spot for GlenAllachie. You don't really see a huge amount of it in the industry. I think Billy, in his previous role, he just started to get going with GlenAllachie and really work out what the liquid was like and work out what cask he's wanted to put it into. And then the takeover happened, which Billy actually, if you spoke to him, he was actually happy with how things were going, but he had a couple of private investors who were happy. They were wanting to almost cash in their chips, so to speak. So Billy, yeah, there's a bit of regrets there with Billy about GlenAllachie, I think. But there's also a distillery he's got a soft spot for is Scapa on Orkney.
Mm.
You sometimes see some of their releases, so if you see that kicking around, you sometimes pay over the odds for it. But no, he's got a soft spot for that as well. But no, this whiskey number two, Scottish Virgin Oak. Hopefully, yeah, you've had a chance to give it a nose, give it a taste. I'll tell you just a little bit about it. This one, as I said, 48% ABV. This again matured in bourbon for about 5.5 to 6 years, and this one has then been finished secondary maturation in 100% Scottish Virgin Oak. So there's no influence of different sherry, different wine, different styles of whiskey, apart from obviously those initial kind of ex-bourbon casks initially. And we've done this as every few months, every year or so, we'll come up with a different release of something that we're trialing on a limited edition, limited run, just to really show off the influence of that. The influence of the casks that our whiskey matured in. We're of the mindset, and I suspect every other distillery should be the mindset that about 70% of a whiskey's kind of final product will come from the cask that it's been into. And I think there's a bit of a misconception, not so much nowadays, but I think previously, where if you saw a 12-year-old whiskey, people would just think, oh, that was just put into a bourbon cask for 12 years. It's taken out on its 12th birthday, and off you go. But there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, and there's a huge amount of influence that each kind of style of cask can give as well. And this is a really nice way of showcasing it. So this one, as I said, yeah, 8-year-old Scottish oak, pretty rare in the industry. Scottish oak was I've seen Fetter Cairn have had a release before. I've not seen any other distilleries have a release of that before. It's not to say that they haven't, but I mean, Scottish oak is not commonly found in the industry for a few reasons. It is, first of all, it's pretty scarce. It's quite rare. It's only really found on, our Atlantic coast, so west coast of Scotland, northwest. The climate in Scotland makes it challenging for things to grow, but for trees to grow, it takes them a long time to grow and mature and be ready for felling, to be felled kind of sustainably, I would say. And it is, so that means that a tree that we have used for our Scottish oak releases, and other people as well. Yeah, I see Bruichladdich as well. No, you're right with that one. These trees will be over 200 years old. I'd say for Quercus alba to be used in the bourbon industry, you're looking at 80, 100 years. So these trees that we are felling, as I said, sustainably, it's taking a long, long time. The trees itself, they're big, wide, they're knotted, they're twisted, they're not long, straight kind of trunks, which are perfect for the industry. So out of every basic trunk that we're felling, we're maybe only getting enough staves that are good enough to be watertight to be used as a barrel. You're maybe only getting 2 casks per trunk, which is, it's not a great almost return on investment, if you like. But then Also, so that's a couple of things about why it's not commonly used. That being said, because it's wide, it's twisted, it's knotted. That means that the whiskey inside the cask is, the casks are prone to leaking. That's pretty porous, the wood. So, if you have got if you've got any barrel, you first of all want it to hold the liquid that it has inside, no matter what it is. And if it's leaking, that's not doing its job. So that's kind of a few reasons why you shouldn't use it. And then lastly is the cost. I would say if you're buying an ex-bourbon cask, you're looking at around about £200 or so. I remember when I first joined the industry almost 5 years ago, I remember when we first paid over £100 for a bourbon cask, and Billy and the guys on site said that this will never last. Paying three figures for a bourbon cask, that will never last. But last 5 years, that's kind of doubled in price. But the price of a Scottish oak, virgin oak cask, same size, 200 litres, you're looking at £1,500 to £1,800 kind of per cask. So that shows you really how much that we'd be spending on the wood. So yeah, so you might ask, as I've just said for the last kind of couple of minutes, about all the bad things about Scottish oak. You might be thinking, well, why the hell would we use it? But it's a couple of reasons. Well, first of all, it's great for us as a Scottish company to promote Scotch, to be using Scottish barrels. I think that side of it is really nice. That's almost the art of it. But then the science behind it as well is it gives off a great, I would say, gentle sweetness, little gentle spiciness to the whiskey. It complements our GlenAllachie spirit very, very well, extremely well. And yeah, using virgin oak can be risky business. It sometimes can be too overpowering. That's why, in our 8-year-old, so at 10% of the cask makeup is virgin oak. This one, as you said, is about 100%. So you run the risk of the whiskey maybe overcooking inside the cask. The virgin oak can be too powerful, too dominant if you leave it in long enough, and that's why we will be looking, monitoring, sampling these casks that are maturing in the warehouse. And yeah, that's when we say the whiskey tells us when it's ready. It's like, there's an analogy that Lindsay, our warehouse manager, and Billy said as well. It's like you're cooking a steak on the barbecue. If you leave it on for even an extra minute, 2 minutes, you can overcook it, and then you can't gain that back. You can't get that back. So that's why we are looking at these casks every few months, just to make sure that we're hitting that almost sweet spot. And then once we've hit that sweet spot, we know that's when it's ready to be bottled. And that's why here we've got an 8-year-old. The next whiskey is virgin oak. That's a 7-year-old. So that's why we've got an idea about what age we want the whiskies to be, but it's not set in stone, and we know exactly when when the whiskey's ready. It's when it tells us. And that's why, as Vadim said at the start, we've got a 13-year-old Madeira kind of cask strength whiskey in market in the US, and that's why that's 13. That's why it's not 12. That's why it's not 14 or 15. We just found that it was ready. It's ready as is, and then we're happy to promote and bottle it and talk about it if people ask us why the slightly different age. So
is it one of those where you take 6-year-old bourbon aged whiskey and you put some in the Scottish oak and you put some in the Hungarian, and then you just, as you said, figured out that the Hungarian oak didn't need as long, or did you know in advance that they were going to be that?
So no, great question. Yeah, on paper we thought and knew that Hungarian oak, virgin oak, would be more powerful, more intense. And I say, yeah, on that, if you've nosed it and tasted it already, I'm hoping you're picking up differences there. To me, the Hungarian oak is much more bold, stronger, which we'll touch on in a couple minutes. But yeah, we had an idea that the Scottish oak may have taken longer, but that said, we've had plenty, almost experiments on site where it's been the complete opposite about how we thought it was going to be. So it just, yes, that's why we have an idea, and we maybe go, say after 6 years, 6.5 years, you put your 6-year-old bourbon matured whiskey into these virgin oak casks. You might go, right, we don't need to look at the Scottish oak for maybe 3 months, because you have an idea about how it's going to go. But with the Hungarian oak, you might go, right, we might need to look at that maybe after a month, even just to see what direction it's going into. So, yeah, that said, nothing's ever set in stone. That's why it is quite labour intensive on site. I'm sure if you speak to Lindsay, our warehouse manager, and the warehouse guys, if you talk to them about sampling, they kind of shudder because it's going on kind of so much so often. But then they do realise that it is worth the pain, as we say, about what goes on behind the scenes. So, but yeah, with the Scottish one, yeah, as I said, the slight spicy notes. I get a little bit of ginger there, so ginger snaps, ginger biscuits. And that comes through. I don't know if you guys are picking up anything else. Yeah, a bit of cinnamon again for me, but overriding for me is the sweetness that comes from it, which on paper being 48% and 48% and no influence of sherry or styles of wine or anything. You run the risk of it being, as I said, pretty alcoholic, but I don't get that. I find this one is a really light whiskey, I would say, and it does appeal to. I know this in Hungarian. I've spoken to people, whiskey drinkers over in America, and they've said they are either bourbon or rye drinkers, and then they have something like this, and they go, actually, yeah, they can get on board because there's obviously that vanilla, those kind of vanilla, kind of classic kind of bourbon notes, butterscotch. And then there's a little bit of a kick there as well, which they're kind of used to. So that's why if you ever meet people that say they're just bourbon drinkers and they don't drink scotch, they've just not found the right one. So that's up to you guys to show them the way. So we can all do our job. But yeah, while I can tell you a little bit more about the distillery of what we're doing, but we can just move on now to the 7-year-old Hungarian oak, as it'd be quite nice to compare and contrast the two of them together, and just see what differences you guys are picking up. As I said, it is, yeah, again, 48% ABV. These have all started off life in the same almost batch of bourbon casks, and then just matured in the slightly, I mean, not the same warehouse. Where different warehouses run the site, but on paper these should be much and such the same as each other, but they're not, and that's what they're supposed to be. And as you guys said, that this one is a different age. It's 7 years old, and that's because we found that Hungarian oak is much more stronger, more powerful. It's almost what you traditionally think of a virgin oak. It's bold, it's punchy, it's verging on intense, but I don't get that at all. It works really well with the bourbon again, with the GlenAllachie spirit. I know this one is probably, you're getting those notes that I talked about before with the Scottish, but much more enhanced. I get maybe a bit of peppercorn, but also brown sugar maybe coming there, kind of on the finish as well. So yeah, I mean, we can do a vote as we go along, but and then a vote to see which one stands out for people, whether it's the Hungarian or whether it's the Scottish. And this one, actually, to make it even more kind of interesting to you, to showcase just the differences in the wood, the actual genus of oak, the style of oak between the Hungarian and the Scottish. I'm pretty sure these are the same genus. So they obviously slight variations, but just shows you you're almost talking about terroir in people talk about in wine. It just shows the influence of the landscape, of the climate, about where the wood is grown, and that how that influences, I mean, the wood itself. I mean, the chemical compounds that will be active in the wood, and these are medium char, medium toasted, obviously in the bourbon, and then they come, and then that kind of brings it to life, I would say. So yeah, it'd be interesting as we go on to get your guys' kind of feedback with this. To me, I would say, my favorite would probably be the Scottish, but I don't know if that's just me kind of tugging at the heartstrings, almost the Braveheart of me coming through, talking about Scotland, but also that's no diss at all on the Hungarian at all.
Well, I mean, it's sad that you're wrong, but no,
yeah.
No, I forgot how much of a fan I was of this 7-year-old Hungarian. To me, it's so viscous. It's so it's so smooth. I know that's sometimes a no word in whiskey, but this to me is a nice dram, and you can sit in front of the fireplace and just kind of sit there and solve the world's problems.
Exactly. I know, as you said talking about smooth, and people sometimes turn their nose up when you talk about that as a whiskey, but sometimes that works when you're describing a whiskey. And also, if I say to people, if they're reading the back of a bottle and you see sometimes a master blender's kind of tasting notes, or somebody from marketing, and there's these big magical words and phrases, sometimes people get almost too caught up on that, and they go, well, I'm not picking up that, so I'm not good enough to drink whiskey single malt. And I say to people, if you enjoy it, that's good enough for me. It's if you find it smooth, you find it spicy, you find it enjoyable, that's good enough for us. Again, we're not here to dictate exactly what tasting notes you must pick up, because
So
as I said,
I just want to jump in here and both agree and totally disagree with Henrik on this, right?
yeah,
yeah. So I agree that it's smooth and it's got that amazing viscousness to it. I like that. But I find that the Scottish oak complements your whiskey better than the Hungarian oak. So for me, it doesn't have maybe the same texture, right? But I think the flavor overall is better with the Scottish oak. And that may be just me trying to be, nice about Scotch and Scottish oak.
Yeah, there we go.
But I totally get what Henrik says, and I'm not going to turn my nose up at the Hungarian. It's not like I don't like it. I like both of them, but I just feel like that.
And for the record, so do I.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Anyway, they're very good. They're both really good. It's amazing how different they are. And all you did was change the wood on them. So
So I'm also wondering, as somebody who has a background in furniture, I mean solid wood furniture, I wonder if when I worked in that industry, we only got wood that was grown north of the Arctic Circle, because that way it doesn't grow as fast, right? So I wonder if the Hungarian wood grows faster than it does in Scotland, and that's why you get this big difference. Even though it's the same species of wood, it's the speed of the growth may have an impact, from a theoretical point of view.
No, you're right. It's I think it's Quercus petraea. It is, and as you said, it's Hungary. It's sort of classic sort of climate extremes, so they have a very good growing season. So spring, summer into early autumn is hot. You're talking high 20s, early 30s. Then have a cold winter, so things will slow down. But for us in Scotland, I'm sure some of you guys will know it, especially West Coast. It's wet and rainy, windy. It's not great for growing. So yeah, you're right there with the Hungarian virgin oak. The climate there will be very similar to, for a lot of the wood is grown for the bourbon industry. So kind of northeast of America. That's where sometimes we get some of our, Chinkopin, the American virgin oak. You have almost the two extremes. So great, warm, hot summers, and then cold kind of winters. But the growing season is great. It's the climate is great for that. And yeah, what you guys had there, a couple of you guys saying there, Henrik and Kate, it's great you guys have your different viewpoints and you're happy to talk about them. To me, there's nothing worse than if someone's sitting there and they maybe disagree with somebody. You say you want that, don't go and fight, don't go and start arguing with each other. But it's because with that, there is no right or wrong answer. I'm not here to tell you exactly which whiskey must be your favorite and which one isn't your favorite.
Henrik and I are duking it out after this tasting.
Good.
Yeah. We're going to be in the alley with our fists up.
Send me the footage. Yeah.
Andrew, just so I can throw a little bit more fuel on this fire, aren't there other virgin oak experiments you guys did? Just so it's not a or B option. There's like A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah. So as part of this series, we had it was a 10-year-old Spanish oak as well. But I would say if you have come across a virgin oak type from around the world and you've not seen it in a GlenAllachie release, we probably either have it on site maturing, or we've released it before. So you've got sort of French oak, as I said, Spanish oak, Mizunara from Japan. We've actually got a couple of really interesting different styles of European oak. We've got some from kind of Siberia, which is the same, I think, latitude as Japan, Mizunara. And the idea with that was we thought these were a lot cheaper than Mizunara casks, but the same latitude as where we get our Mizunara casks from Japan. So we thought they'd be much and such the same. They're completely different, completely opposite. So people might think, well, that's a bad thing, but Billy sees it as there's a bit of excitement there. This is a bit of unknown. So it's and with these almost experiments that we're doing, it's you never know until you try. And you can read up about what other distilleries have done, or about how something maybe works in a pilot sample or in a lab. But you don't know until you try it yourself on site with your spirit and in your warehouse. So that's what I find quite refreshing. And if something maybe doesn't work too well, then you go, oh, well, at least we've given it a try and we can know not to do that again. So I would say with these kind of releases, we're not trying to flood a market with these releases. They're fairly limited edition. So they're kind of, once they're gone, kind of they're gone. And I find that kind of quite exciting as well. So, but I would say on that front, if you're talking about a style of virgin oak or wine, or even styles of bourbon, we are doing our best to try and get access to some of those casks, to take them to the distillery and to get them to mature, and really just to see the influence of what happens with the wood, and with the whiskey. And yeah, I see, Jason, there was a question there about the colour being noticeably lighter, which it definitely is. And that you said, is it does it come from the length of time, or is it from the nature of the wood? And I would say that's probably more so the nature of the wood as opposed to the length of time in the cask, which is, to me, quite interesting. On paper, you think, oh, that's just lighter because it spent less time in there. But no, it's that would just be coming from the partos kind of in the wood itself, which is is interesting, and again just shows you the differences of what the wood can give to your whiskey. So yeah, I mean, we're not going to jump now straight to the next whiskey. So by all means, give the previous two, still give them a nose, give them a taste, see if you're picking up anything different. And yeah, I'll tell you just a little bit about what we're doing on site at the distillery, what we're doing and what we've changed, not just on the maturation side of things. So, as I said at the start, we've got the capacity to produce upwards of 4 million litres of alcohol a year, which nowadays, 2025, is a substantial size site. There we go. Henrik with his bottles there, good man. But that was when the distillery was pumping out liquid 24/7. So everything that was, as I said, was getting produced was going into blends. This was at your 50-60 hour fermentation time. It's not a flash in the pan job, but that's when the single malt that's getting produced is going into, as I said, into a blend. So it's completely different to what we and many other smaller independent single malt guys are trying to do. So this is what GlenAllachie was doing pre-Billy Walker, and actually Billy used to work with GlenAllachie Spirit back in the day, making old Ballantines in the 70s and 80s, and the GlenAllachie Spirit always had a really good reputation amongst the blenders in Scotland, about being a really strong, bold kind of Speyside spirit single malt. And I think Billy and a few others had the idea that it was maybe wasted away. It was a waste for it to be kind of put into a blend, mixed with some grain spirit, and bottled at 40% ABV. So that's where Billy's he says his notion about, he had a fascination about GlenAllachie and maybe getting the idea about gaining access to the site. And yeah, luckily for him, he did. So we gained access to the site where it was pumping out 4 million litres of alcohol a year. In 2024, we produced just upwards of 1 million litres. So on paper, if any accountants, people that work in finance in the building, they you think you're working at 25% capacity. Where's that 75% that you're missing? Where's that coming from? And that we're doing that on purpose. That's not by fluke, by chance. We did a lot of trials and tests to work out exactly on site what we wanted to do and what we wanted to get from our spirit and where we wanted our GlenAllachie spirit to kind of go to. So we did a lot of trials and tests with our mashing time, mashing temperatures, fermentation time, distillation times, temperatures, cut points, to work exactly what we wanted to do. And yeah, the result of that is that we have a much stronger, bolder, almost fruitier GlenAllachie spirit than we had beforehand. We've not reinvented the wheel. Old GlenAllachie spirit used to be pretty kind of ester rich, kind of you're getting big fruity notes, green apple. So if you get the chance to come to the site to GlenAllachie, try some of our new make. It's knocking on 70% ABV, and yeah, it's verging on sweet, which is quite interesting to kind of describe a alcoholic drink at 70%. It's verging on a rocket fuel, but you don't get that alcohol there, and that's testament to the spirit. So we've changed each stage of production just to make sure that we are getting the best that we can. So, I mean, starting from the start to the finish, the barley that we buy comes from a 30-mile radius from the distillery, which is testament to Billy wanting to work with local farmers, and almost, again, it's going about that almost transparency. We've got a sort of a list of farmers where we can say that's where we get our spring malted barley from. I'm fortunate and unfortunate in the way that my dad and my brother are some of those farmers. So some of the barley that GlenAllachie uses comes from my family, which is great for me. But also the downside of that is that every year my dad and my brother have a go at Billy, saying, "Oh, the poor farmer, they're never paid enough. They need to be paid more, this and that." And then Billy says the farmers are paid plenty, and I choose to pick Billy's side because he pays my wages. So it's always an interesting conversation. It's the same every year. It's happened for 5 years now. So, but with that, it's nice because yeah, you're trying to bring in the local community as much as possible into what you're doing. If any of you guys have been lucky enough to come to Speyside, it's a remote place. It's dominated by agriculture and the whiskey industry, and it's great for us to really try and bring in as much of that kind of local community as much as possible. Because yeah, as I said, the distillery itself really ran under the radar. I've still got friends in the northeast of Scotland. You say you work for GlenAllachie, and they're not really sure where it is. So definitely it ran under the radar. The site used to have 2 distillers, and that was it, and a warehouse team that would have been busting a couple of times a week as part of the Shivers team, and that was it. But nowadays, on site, we will have a workforce of knocking on 15 during the summer between our visitor centre staff, warehouse staff, and distillation staff. So now there's a nice, really nice kind of hub community feel when you come to the site. So that's where the barley comes from. Our mashing in. We will mash and we will sparge kind of 4 waters during our sort of mashing time, each temperature increasing every single time. Starting off the top of my head, I think about 65, and then our final water is almost at boiling point, 1995 or so. So we're just trying to again, we're not doing anything different. We're just trying to extract as much as possible and gain access to as much of those really fermentable sugars that is in the starch, and then convert it into sugars of the starch that's in that barley. So then we take that into the fermentation stage, and that's really where we've changed things. As I said at the start, we have the fermentation time when Shivers were running the site was at 50 to 60 hours. Nowadays, that fermentation time is upwards of 163 hours is our minimum kind of standard fermentation. So that's almost a week. That's almost 7 days of our eventually wort, but of our wort bubbling away. We pitch the yeast, and after 40, 50 hours, there's that normal kind of fermentation where you look into a washback, it's bubbling, it's frothing, it's very active. But after that, it dies down. You look in and you might think there's nothing There's nothing really happening. Yeah, the fermentation is maybe just about finished, but we have found there's a huge amount of oxidation and esterification occurs in that next kind of 100 hours, and that doesn't do anything to the ABV at all. ABV at the end of our kind of fermentation cycle is 8.59% ABV. So that beer that we have is no different to many other competitors that we have. But just what we have there is it's just flavor rich. That esterification and oxidification, easy to say it 5 to 4 in the morning, but yeah, it just influences those flavor compounds. So those ester rich, those big, strong, fruity notes that you're wanting from the spirit. So it's no, if you get the chance to come to the site, get a chance to sample the beer that we have. That's what we call our liquor that we have after the fermentation stage, and then we also have that really strong ester rich after the distillation kind of process. So after that, we have pitched our yeast, and that's eaten away at as much of the sugar as much as possible. Yet fermentation will still continue between the 50-hour mark and the 150-hour mark, but the most of it is done in that initial kind of 50 to 60-hour phase. But that said, on site, people go, why 160 hours? Surely that's random. But no, we did trials and tests, and that's what we picked on. We've also we've got some spirit on site that is being matured. That's been matured for 500 hours during the fermentation. And people go, well, why? And that was Billy just said, why not? Who knows what will happen? And again, with that, who knows if that liquid will ever see the light of day? But it's that great ethos of that experimentation that we do is really, really, it's interesting. It's always different, and it keeps us on our toes. But doing that fermentation at that 160 hours is fine on paper, but having it for that long, you need to make sure that there's no buildup of bad bacteria. You have the inside of a washback. With ours, they are steel. It's not wooden, but yeah, it is steel, and it's warm in there. It's the perfect condition for bad bacteria to grow and to duplicate and to be active and to be present in there. And once it's present, it's quite hard to get rid of. So that's testament to the production team to make sure that things are as clean as they can be. And yeah, if you guys have come to the site and had the chance to kind of walk around the site, a lot of people comment about actually the state, about how clean everything is, especially inside the still house. People think it's a show home, and that's just testament to the guys about obviously being proud about where they work, but also wanting to make sure you're minimizing the risk of any kind of bad bacteria getting in to anywhere, kind of any of our spirit or our wort, kind of anytime along the system. So yeah, after that we've got our beer, 8.59% ABV. Then we run it through our sort of distillation house. So we run it through our wash still, then our spirit still. The cut points that we are taking are real different to what happened before. That's not saying we're not doing a good job compared to what the guys kind of did beforehand, but we've just slowed it down, our distillation. It's not a flash in the pan. It's not a violent kind of boiling inside the stills, which they're basically a kettle. We let the wort in there bubble along, and it takes as long as it takes. It takes a lot of time, not effort, but it takes a lot of time for the wort inside to bubble up, for the vapors to rise and actually then condense down, and then to create that spirit kind of droplet. And we're happy with that. And again, people say, well, is that not energy intensive? Are you not trying to be sustainable? And yeah, we are. And actually, if you come to our site over the next month, you sadly won't be able to see into our into the spirit house, the distillation house, as we are undertaking a huge amount of kind of engineering work. We're installing kind of mechanical vapor recompression kind of system on site. If there's any engineers in here, I'm sure you know more about it than me, but this just means we're capturing a lot of our wasted heat and energy, and recycling that back into the system. So once that is installed, we'll be cutting down our energy usage by 50%, which will definitely help us, and also helps us to showcase that, yeah, people talk about being sustainable and it's a bit of a buzzword, but if you can actually say, yeah, we're doing a bit of investment and this is what we're doing, I think people can kind of buy into that. You don't need to be a chemical engineer to understand that people are maybe that we're trying our best to kind of tick those boxes. So after that, after distillation, we've got our new mixed spirit that is sitting at around 68.5% ABV, and we generally fill it at that strength. Most people in industry, they will bottle at 63.5% ABV. We're happy to bottle at that slightly higher, just because we have that influence to, how would you describe it simply? You've got the influence. So if you fill a cask at 68%, that is going to mature, and that's going to drop from 68 to 63. So you've got 5% worth of ABV that you're going to lose out on if you then just fill it at 63%. So we don't know what the influences are, but again, we're happy to fill it at that higher ABV and just to see exactly what goes on kind of during the magic inside the warehouse, which is really exciting to us. And then, yeah, once we have our new mixed spirit at that 68%, we will fill it all on site, and that's really important to us. We've got 16 warehouses on site. We're going to be building more pretty soon, and I think if you get the chance to come to the site, people get blown away by the scale of it. By the 16 warehouses, it's big. We've got the capacity to hold upwards of 100,000 casks, so we're able to hold everything under the one roof, if you like, and it gives us the chance to monitor and keep an eye on everything, as instead of, it's quite common in the industry for your whiskey to be matured around the country, so you can't really gain an understanding about what is happening, and also historically that was done as an insurance policy. The days of the warehouseman being inside of a warehouse smoking a cigarette where you have alcohol over 68% ABV and wood, it's recipe for a disaster. If a fire breaks out, it's game over. So that's why whiskey used to be stored kind of all around the country. But nowadays we keep it under the one roof. Health and safety now plays a part. So the chances of fires kicking off is pretty small. So that's really what we've done on what we've done on site, how we've changed things. Again, any questions on that, please just type away. But I think after that, hopefully not boring lecture, it's time for whiskey number 4, which is our 9-year-old cuvee, which is our 2012 kind of vintage. So if you want to give this whiskey number 4, give it a nose, give it a taste, and again, see what you think. This again is something completely different, which is great for me to talk about and introduce to you guys, but also it's great for you guys to get the chance to taste, and that's what you want from these kind of sessions, is to have whiskies that are completely different, and to really see the differences that do come out there. So this next one, just a bit of a background, again, kind of limited release. This one came around as not a fluke, but this came about as it's Billy was working around in his lab, working with different pilot samples of 4 different styles of red wine, and this is the result of it. I think Billy was maybe thinking about working with coming up with almost a wine release similar to our Virgin Oak release. So you have 3 different styles of wine kind of come to the market. But Billy was working around, and as all good blenders do, they like to trial and experiment and see what happens when you mix sample bottles together. And this is the foundations of that came from here. And so this one is 48% ABV. This again started off its life 6.5 years, 7 years in ex-bourbon casks. And then this is then split into 4 different styles of that red wine, as I said. So we've got 2 from Bordeaux, 2 red wines from Premier Cru Classé chateaus in Bordeaux. We've got one red wine from the Languedoc region in France and one from Valpolicella in Italy. So this one is, as I said, is completely different. It is supposed to be. It's very different to our classic sherry kind of styles that people kind of know and kind of recognise from what we do with at GlenAllachie. But the idea of that is of this is to be a little bit different and just to showcase again, just that banging on the drum about the influence of those casks. And there's Kate, you've just put there about the nose and then the taste after. I would almost agree with you. I would say the nose that you get, to me, is completely different to the taste that you get. And again, that's why almost don't judge a book by its cover, by the nose. It's all about the experience, about the taste and the finish as well. And again, if you feel this needs a bit of water, by all means, give it a small amount just to see what you think. And to me, I get much more sort of summer fruits on here. And Vadim, funky sherry, sour. Yeah, I get almost summer fruits, whether it's a bit of berries in there. And again, with that almost citrus, orange, lime zest, lemon zest to an extent. But again, it'd be actually really interesting to pick up your guys' viewpoints on this, as this one sometimes kind of divides opinion. Sometimes you have people and they die for it and they can't get enough of it, and you get some people who are maybe the more traditional kind of sherry bomb drinkers, and they go, maybe this one is maybe not for me. So interesting to hear you guys kind of feedback on this. And again, it's no whiskey's perfect. No whiskey's going to be everyone's favorite. So it's always interesting to hear you guys kind of viewpoints on that. And also a couple of good notes being written in, but also with a tasting note, there's no right or wrong tasting note as well. It's all about, again, it's talking about whiskey being an art or a science. And sometimes whiskey can be completely individual. You could taste a whiskey and it brings you back to sometime where you were drinking a glass of red wine, you were eating a bit of food, you were maybe not even drinking, just about the environment, talking about the art, the almost the fairy tale marketing kind of behind it. But sometimes it is true enough. You could be drinking a whiskey and go, oh, that takes me to XYZ, which is very individual. Maybe you can't portray that across the people. So that's why sometimes you see these weird and wonderful kind of tasting notes, which is always nice to see. So, and I think on that one, the weirdest one I've had is somebody once told me it reminds them of being at the beach when they were younger, and they used to pick up stones and they used to lick sand off the stone when they were younger on the beach. And I kind of said, this was in a masterclass of maybe 50 people, and I kind of said, maybe you should keep that to yourself. I wouldn't tell people that's what you get up to in your spare time. So, but no, on that, as I said, again at the start, there's no right or wrong answer with whiskey, and I think going back to this one, going back to Billy himself, he's a fan of a glass of wine, I would say, as opposed to, I mean, obviously he enjoys a whiskey, but I think he sees whiskey as more his work. So he gets enjoyment at the end of the day about enjoying a glass of kind of French or Italian kind of red or white wine. So I think that's where that interest came almost in the background for this. But also with Billy, he has built up his now 53 years of experience working in the industry. So he's got these connections all around the world from different bourbon houses, bodegas, wine houses. So that's almost it's a difficulty nowadays in the industry for people to gain access to good quality wood. I think it's almost an oversight. So nowadays people may be building a new distillery. Say you build a new distillery in Scotland and you go, right, I'm going to build this distillery, make fantastic liquids, but then you go, I don't have access to good quality wood, and then you don't have the budget to pay over the odds for casks. So you're using fourth, fifth fill bourbon bourbon casks where there's not a huge amount of life in them. I say that's a waste kind of on the whiskey. So with us, we're using our whiskey, we're using our casks first, second fill, and then that's it. We deem that's not good enough for us, and then we sell that into the industry. And then with Billy's connections, he has great connections, as I said, with these bourbon houses, wine houses, these cooperages. So sometimes if people have something a little bit interesting, they pick up the phone, and almost Billy has almost kind of first refusal on it, which is a great strong position to kind of be in, I would say. Because with the growth of the growth of the industry, I know growth of the bourbon industry especially, there's a huge amount more bourbon getting produced than a few years ago, but the downside of that for Scotch is that there's a huge amount more bourbon being matured and being kept a hold of, so there's less almost bourbon casks in the open market. So that's how nowadays you're spending a lot of over the odds money for sometimes kind of poor casks, which is what you don't want from anyone. So, I mean, just to almost showcase to you that when we took on the site, and I was part of the kind of, as I said, the production team and in the warehouse sampling, I remember sampling some casks that were 15 years old, 15-year-old GlenAllachie. They'd spent their whole life in 7th fill bourbon oak, and taking a sample from these casks, and it looked like water. Looked like there wasn't not much maturation had happened in there. This whiskey had aged that hadn't matured. That's what we kind of talk about. We want our whiskey to mature instead of age. But this whiskey had aged, and we thought, oh God, what are we going to do here? How are we going to tell this to how are we going to tell Billy this? And we picked up the phone, told Billy, sent him a couple of pictures when he wasn't on site. And then Billy went again. He went, oh no, this is great. He says, we've got a blank canvas of a 15-year-old whiskey at very high ABV with not much maturation has occurred. He says, this is exciting. This is we're going to try something different kind of on here. You don't really get the chance of that. And again, that just shows kind of Billy's kind of mindset to things. He's always looking at sort of the positive, almost has a half sort of glass half full instead of glass half empty. But these casks, they were so thin, you could almost feel like if you kicked it, the cask would just fall to pieces. And that just shows, because every time you fill a cask and you empty it and you mature it, you're stripping it from the inside. You're stripping of the goodness, so the scientific phrase, but you're stripping of the goodness on the activeness of those chemical compounds. So every time you're emptying it, you're stripping it, and it's getting thinner and thinner. The cask almost shrinks in depth pretty much. So that's why with us, we're using a cask. We're not using a cask after second fill, and we'll sell it back into the industry. So yeah, see, there's a question there from Matt, which is it's the variation of cask sourcing outside of Spain, France, US due to cost, large experimentation, or both. Yeah, Matt, I would say both, to be honest with you. Cost definitely comes into it. You'd be lying if I said it doesn't. If it didn't, but I would say with that, Billy, we say he likes to spend his money on casks. He doesn't have a fancy yacht. He doesn't have a holiday house around the world. He, we say his kids, they joke that they're spending Billy's spending their inheritance on casks. But so no, the cost definitely does come into it, and we'll come into it with some producers. They may have a cask budget for a year, and they maybe aren't able to go above that, and that's sometimes where people are restricted. But then also with the experimentation side of things, sometimes you don't really have a choice maybe of, first of all, what the cost would be. If you're dying to use some Mizunara cask from Japan, you know you're going to pay over the odds, and you know you're going to only be able to speak to one kind of cooperage in Japan to gain access to that. I mean, on that front with us, on the bourbon side of things, we try and gain access to bourbon casks from Heaven Hill. We find that works really well with our GlenAllachie Spirit, but also Heaven Hill as a bourbon itself is pretty good, we find. Then the downside of that is also there's a huge amount of other people that are trying to gain access to Heaven Hill casks, so it's a supply and demand thing. So sometimes you're going to have to pay over the odds for something, but also you're sometimes going to have to use casks from another kind of bourbon producer because you're going to need to fill your whiskey. So yeah, Matt, it's it's a bit of both, basically. Long-winded answer, both on that front. So,
Andrew, that 15-year-old really light, essentially look like new make whiskey. Did that ever get released, or are you going to release it? Because I know your new make tastes delicious, so I can imagine rested for 15 years and not had any color. Who cares if it tastes great?
yeah.
It should be part of your experimental series, because I think you guys are really breaking ground, doing something really interesting with the virgin oaks and the wine finishes, and releasing them side by side so people can really taste. Have you considered writing like a scientific paper on this so that the whiskey nerds of the world can really read into it?
Yeah, so on that one, I would say doing a scientific piece, that was something I say, if I was still, say, me personally, if I was still at university and I was doing work experience, that's something that's a thesis in itself waiting to be written. So that's something that I would, maybe not me, I say my student days are behind me, but something to maybe what I would like to do is maybe start to get students involved on site and get them to do some work experience, and then almost guide them into a thesis idea, just to get the science to maybe reiterate kind of what the art is maybe saying, but also sometimes the science may completely disagree with what you're saying. And I think with those casks, I think some of those that ended up as some of our kind of first almost kind of distillery kind of handfills, something that were a little bit different on site. So what we did with these really old, so old wood, the 15-year-old GlenAllachie Spirit, we would have re-racked them into your first fill sherry puncheons or sherry hogsheads, that type of thing, to give them a new lease of life, pretty much. So, so that's really.
Sorry.
No worries. On you go, Tony.
I was just wondering how you compare it to your 13-year Madeira cask.
So, this cuvee, I would say.
Oh no, like the 15 to the
Yeah.
13-year.
So I would say, I would say, again, it's easy for me saying this on paper, but I would say 13-year-old Madeira, and again, being cast strength, really, it works so well. And it's, I think any whiskey that's put into Madeira, it is fantastic. To me, it's a summer style of whiskey. It's a summer dram. It's your summer fruits, kind of citrus coming in big time. To me, I think off the top of my head, sadly, as it's only found in America, I don't have a bottle in front of me, but I think in kind of oranges, there's a really great orange note on it, but it's a light whiskey that you don't get if you're drinking it cast strength, you don't get that influence at all. It's for sometimes, I mean, when you're talking about 15-year-old, it's and again, other whiskies, we'll move to the 50-year-old in a second, but the other whiskies, sherry Spacesides are big, strong, bold sherry bombs, which are great for some people, but others they're maybe not, and that's where the Madeira maybe comes into the fore. So,
thank you.
No worries. And again, just I think on that, Tony, and for the whiskies that we've had tonight, it's as I said, and we've said a couple of times, and as we had almost with the fight earlier on, there's no right or wrong answer with whiskey, but also it's everyone's individual. So somebody might say, right, the 13-year-old Madeira is my favorite one, and someone might say, well, actually, the GlenAllachie 8-year-old Scottish Oak or the GlenAllachie 8-year-old is my favorite one. And there's no right or wrong answer. And that's, so you're trying to not appeal to the masses, but you're trying to appeal to kind of to everyone there type thing. So
the only problem is just objectively, the 10-year cast strength is the best one. So that's the problem with your statement, but it's fine.
There we go.
But objectively, that's the best one.
I think there'll be a lot of people would agree with that one as well, Jordan. So yeah. But no, I see there's a couple of questions about just about the site at GlenAllachie. There's one, Jamie and Megan, what's the significance of horizontal condensers at GlenAllachie? So no, again, good point, good question. You've been doing your research, or you've been to the site. But with that one, when the distillery was built in the 1960s, it was built with kind of sustainability as a buzzword even back then, which is funny nowadays, 21st century, everyone's talking about sustainability. But back then, even if you're standing on site, it's a pretty small production area. So you're not walking from one side to the other side of the site, from the mash tun to the washbacks to the spirit house. Everything's kind of almost gravity fed on site, which is great. And that's where I think the idea of those horizontal condensers came about, is that they're gravity fed. So the liquid, the spirit, when it eventually vaporizes and drops into there, it's not then pumped very quickly from A to B and rushes through a vertical condenser. It kind of flows naturally through the horizontal condenser. But also with that one, sadly, there's none of the architects or engineers around from when the distillery was built in the 60s to really answer why it was done that way. So also with that, there is a bit of a mystery behind it. But also that's a bit of the, again, I would say almost excitement about working at GlenAllachie. And again, if Billy was here, he'd talk to you about the distillery, and he'd talk to you about how he's a custodian of it. He's not just the sole owner, even though he is, but he's the custodian just now, and then he would pass that on to, when Billy moves on in life in 20 years' time, someone else will be in charge and they will want to put their viewpoint on it. But you also, if you're looking after an old historical site, even though GlenAllachie is built in the 1960s, an older site, you want to remain and look after what was kind of done in the past. So the horizontal condensers were there for a reason. If they were vertical, they would be vertical, and it's not up to us to completely change that and flip that on its head on site. So that's kind of a bit of both about why they are kind of horizontal. Then also there was another one somewhere. That's it from Matt again. Does the region of a cask where the tree grew factor in your purchase? I would say, again, the politician answer, yes and no, Matt. It's I would say it's more what we are wanting to get out of a cask is more important, instead of exactly the region being the defining factor. We're never going to say no to a cask because we found that it's grown in a certain area. Yeah, it may play a part, but that just adds into the whole decision-making process. And again, it's also buying cask, buying wood. It's also, a lot of it is done on trust. If you're buying these new styles of virgin oak or wine casks, virgin oak casks from a cooperage, a lot of that is done on trust, because you can't base that on what has been done in the past. So if you've got a cooperage that's saying, "Oh, we've got access to this fantastic wood from Hungary, it's not been used before, but yeah, we think this will really work," you've got to take their kind of guidance on that front. And if it's a complete disaster and the wood is horrible and it's not what they said it was, then you're probably not going to go back and use them kind of ever again. So, and that's where, going back to the point I said earlier about people when they are, if they're maybe buying casks for the first time, if they've got a new distillery, I've heard of you hear a lot of almost horror stories of people when they buy say they buy 100 bourbon casks, and they are so first of all, bourbon casks, they're shipped over from America, and they open the back of a container, and these casks are old, they're battered, they're leaking. They're not paying for what what they've bought, and that's sometimes kind of the horror story. So that's why I think nowadays, again, 21st century, but there's still a lot of I think a lot of trust goes on kind of behind the scenes. So so that kind of answers kind of those two. So I think it's time to move on to whiskey number 5, if that's all right with you guys, which is our GlenAllachie 15-year-old. So this is with this one, the GlenAllachie 15. Obviously, this one really, it's the older brother of the 8-year-old that we had at the start. This is the whiskey here that describes GlenAllachie as your kind of classic house sherried style, I would say. So I toyed with the idea of maybe putting this at the start, but then you go actually maybe wait till towards the end, just to let people see maybe some younger spirit, to make it a bit more youthful, and then have something a bit more older kind of towards the end. So this is our GlenAllachie, 15-year-old. So please, as I said, if you've not poured it into your glass, give it a nose, give it a taste. Or maybe some people may have not have any left of it already. So this one is, I mean, this alongside our GlenAllachie 12-year-old and also our 10-year-old kind of cast strength series, this has really helped put us on the map. This has really helped us to kind of grow GlenAllachie to what it is kind of nowadays. I mean, we've only been around for 7, now into our 8th year, and we've not taken over the industry, not at all, but we've done pretty well over the last 7, 8 years, and something like this, the GlenAllachie 15, has helped put us on the map, I would say. And this, just simply put, is I mean, Jason's put it, he said it instead of me, it's a personal top 5 whiskies, but no, I think this is what we wanted to do with our house style is just have something that is sort of that ticks the boxes, should be an easy drinker, shouldn't be inoffensive, shouldn't be one that divides opinion. This should be a whiskey that it's a crowd pleaser, I would say. And with this one being 46% ABV, and again, a bit of background on it. This one's again in bourbon for maybe 11 and a half years, maybe verging on 12. Yeah, probably about 11 and a half on average. And then this one is just matured in a mixture of Pedro Jimenez Oloroso sherry. So this is verging on your kind of sherry bomb. This is where you're getting those big, strong notes, your raisins, butterscotch, chocolate, mocha, bit of cinnamon on the end. But to me, this is exactly what, if someone described to you a sherry Speyside, this is what you're kind of thinking of already. So, and I think with this one as well, it's sometimes you run the risk of, sherry's great, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely fantastic, especially PX Oloroso, but especially PX, you can run the risk of it becoming too much, too overpowering. Especially PX, Pedro Jimenez, it can become too sickly sweet if you use it incorrectly or you leave it in the cask for too long. So that's up to us, it's up to Billy and the warehouse team to make sure that this whiskey hasn't overmatured in the cask and then in the bottle. So because I'm sure we've maybe tried some sherry whiskies in the past where sometimes all you're getting is that overriding sweetness, which to some people ticks the boxes, but I would say, you're wanting a bit of that spirit to come through. You want that vanilla, that butterscotch from the GlenAllachie spirit, those kind of esters to come in as well. You don't want to mask up those flavors at all. You want to, it's almost like you're talking about with these whiskies, it's almost a blend within a single malt, because there's those influences from the GlenAllachie spirit, but those influences from the PX, from the Oloroso, but also from the bourbon as well. So that's what you want kind of in there. But I think with this, if you see this on the shelf or in a bar or in somebody's house and they see the color of it, and you say to them, it's all natural, no caramel is added, nothing's taken away, then that people start to go, it kind of gains their interest. But also, I've been at many whiskey events around the world where people, they come to you and they go, oh, surely there's caramel added to this. Like, oh, come on, you can tell me, like, as a secret, kind of wink, wink, there must be a bit of caramel added and that's it. But no, that influence, that just comes from those sherry casks that I've talked about, and that just shows the great high quality of them. To something to portray that color after kind of max kind of 3 years is pretty special, I would say. So,
it might just be tonight, but the way it's hitting me is so nice. It reminds me of like a very high quality soft serve vanilla chocolate swirl. If you made that into a milkshake and then made that booze in like the best possible fat kid, I love booze kind of way. I mean, it's just
nice.
It's playing together so nicely. I'm really digging this.
Yeah, no, and again, obviously not boasting about it. It is a fantastic whiskey. I've got again a lot of friends who are maybe, when you talk about whiskey, they've not touched it since we were 16 years old, and you mix it with your bottle of your Dr. Pepper or your lemonade, and then you've got a very bad hangover and you don't touch it for evermore, and you think that's what whiskey is. But you pour them a glass of this with some water and they go, oh wow, I didn't realize whiskey could taste like that. And with this, again, being 46% ABV is slightly higher, but you don't get that. So with this, if the mood is right, you could sit down and you could easily, before you know it, I've had more than 1 dram of this without realizing. And when you do realize it, it's when you've stood up, and it takes a while to kind of get your steps together. So that's where, need to say with the please drink responsibly kind of slogan to say that, but no, we're all adults here, so drink responsibly as long as it's GlenAllachie. So but no, it'll be interested here with people, if people have had the GlenAllachie 12 before, but also if they compare it with the 15, because sometimes a lot of people, they compare and contrast. And with me, on my side of things, my granny, who from Speyside, 96 years old, she calls the GlenAllachie 12 her breakfast whiskey, and the GlenAllachie 15 is the before dinner whiskey. So that's a quite nice way of putting it. So the 12 for the morning and the 15 for early evening. So but yeah, with this one, I think with the 15, it's always, if you see it out and about in a liquor store or in a back bar, usually it's people seem to know kind of about it, which is great, and that's testament to obviously the work that the distillery is doing, but that's testament to the Impex team and their distributors around about America about the word that they're doing about promoting the brand, but also that's also testament to you guys, the consumer, for having clubs like this where you get together and you talk about whiskies that you enjoy and you maybe don't enjoy, and that's where the fights break out. But also, it's up to you guys to. It's great that you guys can meet in person, but also meet virtually like this and discuss drams that you've maybe had and maybe not had. So that is so that's great, and that's really what it's all about. And with the whiskey, it's meant to be shared. And it's not in person. It's great to be doing things like this. And yeah, on that front, with me, it's early. It's in the morning, but it's no issue for me to sit and talk for a couple of hours with you guys about our products and to again hear what you guys have got to say and to kind of answer those questions as well, because that's all part of the fun of it. I would say. But on the 15, I would say there's a statement there from Jamie and Megan just saying, basically saying about the variations on different batches of it. And I would say with that, it's with us being sort of transparent, so as transparent as possible. With us, we have the influence of it's non-chill filtered, no added color, always 46% ABV using these active casks. I would say, there may be slight differences batch after batch or year after year, even though it's always core range. It's always meant to be as good as it can be, and that means that sometimes you could have a 2023 bottling of this, for example, that may have slightly more Oloroso than this release that we're enjoying just now, and that's because Billy and the blending team may have thought that it just needed it to make it tick all the boxes. It needed just a little bit of a tweak. But I say with that, that's a percent here and a percent there of the cask kind of makeup of it. So we have, with all of our bottlings, but also our core range, we have there's almost a recipe sheet, I would say, but that's not followed to 100%. That's just a guide, and then you have your pilot samples in the lab, and then you work out just the final stages, exactly what needs tweaked, what maybe needs a bit extra, and what maybe needs a bit less of, and that's what I think again is quite nice about it. But also with some people, sometimes people get quite annoyed, almost with I know Jordan, you talked about the 10-year cask strength kind of being kind of ticking the boxes, but some people, they go, oh, batch 5 was my favorite, or batch 8 was my favorite, or batch 7 was my favorite, and that's where the slight difference is always the whole time. And that's why with GlenAllachie 12, 15, even 18, there may be slight differences you're picking up, but also sometimes for a lot of people it ticks the boxes every time. So that's always good with me. So
Andrew, how do we know which like, so the 10-year cask strength, that one always has the batch numbers. You can, if you love batch 5, you can seek it out at a store. The 15, is there like a laser code we should look for, or like how do we know that, hey, the one I got today, and if I want to go back and get 10 more bottles, I want to get the same one. I don't want to get the one from last year. One.
So I would say, I mean, obviously so if you go to your liquor store, usually what they would have on the shelf is all probably from the same batch. Obviously, just the way the shipping and everything works like that, the logistics side of things. But also, if you look at any of our bottles, I mean, any whiskey bottle, usually with us, it's at the bottom. There's like a stamp kind of printed on from the bottling hall, which has, it's almost like the date of bottling on it. Some whiskies will be at the top underneath the capsule. So if you're able to, I say do that before you've had a few whiskies, because it's very hard to see. So if you do it after some whiskies, it's complete minefield. So, but no, and that's sometimes people, they do that, and sometimes I've had people, they've had a tasting of 6 different kind of GlenAllachie 12-year-olds, just to see the differences there. But then that said, some people will drink it and they go, I'm not getting much difference at all. But then you get somebody there who goes, actually, I'm picking up a slight difference here and a slight difference there. And again, that's going back. It's there's no right or wrong answer to it. So yeah, it looks as if there's a couple of people going to get another glass of a 15-year-old, which is yeah. And as you said, yeah, Henrik as well, for science. That's always good. All in the name of science, it means everything's fine. So that's what we said when I used to work on site. You would obviously, if you're sampling the whiskies, sometimes a sample may find its way into your back pocket or into your backpack to go home with on a Friday. But and again, that was all in the name of science, or for market research. That's what we call it. So yeah, always market research. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know how, but usually it ended up, it was sometimes it was for a single cask, or sometimes maybe a nicer older whiskey. They were the bottles that used to end up in your back pocket somehow. So but no, I hope this one's kind of ticked the boxes. And then yeah, before we move on to our final whiskey, obviously everything that we've drank tonight is obviously unpeated with GlenAllachie. Some of you guys may have seen or tasted just in the last 12 months in America, or even if you've come across to Europe, to the UK, you may have seen GlenAllachie, or through our social media, talking about Miko Tor, a different brand that we have, Miko Tor. And people may think, well, what is that? Miko Tor is a bit of a trial experiment that we've been running for about the last 5-6 years, and this is GlenAllachie Spirit, but it is peated. GlenAllachie and Speyside is obviously traditionally unpeated. Peated whiskey traditionally comes from the West Coast, comes from Islay. But we have been running about 10% of our production as peated spirit, again, just as a trial, just to see how it comes around, and how our spirit is portrayed on that front. And that's been a really exciting experiment for us as a company, to bring a new brand to the market. And the feedback has generally been great for a really, really young whiskey, 5 years old. It is young. And it is, I hope you guys have had the chance to try it. And with this, just quickly talking about the Miko Tor,
are you going to get some older expressions of that, or is it going to stay 5 year?
Yeah, so at the moment it's going to stay 5 years old, but we have stock maturing on site. And I will say, I've seen our bottling lineups for this year, for initially the plans for next year, and I've not seen anything. So that makes me think we're maybe waiting until whether that's 10 years old to bring out core range kind of Miko Tor. That's great that we're keeping stock behind. But the interesting thing with that is that we've been using our peat from the mainland. So it's not from the West Coast, it's not from Islay. So the peat that we're using is actually much more, it's less intense than your Ardbeg, Lafroigs, that type of thing. So that is, it's worked really well. It's been really exciting. But that said, I know we are doing some trials and experiments with using different styles of peat now. So peat maybe from Orkney, peat from Islay, peat from the West Coast, just to see how that influences the spirit. So that just kind of shows you there's always something different going on site. So Billy doesn't let anyone.
I'm pretty sure Kate is looking forward to trying all those peated whiskies.
There we go. Well, I mean, if you just need to come to Scotland, come to the distillery, and you'll get the chance to have a good amount, or speak to the guys at Impex, because they've been great supporters of Miko Tor since it's come to market. And no, we've managed to get a really good following just in the last kind of 12 months. So I'll say, and that's down to you guys for buying and drinking it. So keep it up responsibly, always, obviously. But so just before we move to the last whiskey, there's a question from Jamie and Megan on visit the distillery. I remember saying giant water processor of some sort. So that would be the water processor that you're looking at. That would be, I think, the water coolers out the back of the site. And they are obviously during the whiskey production process, there's a lot of energy sort of used at the end of the production process. Is a lot of warm, hot water that, if that then needs to go back into the ecosystem, goes into the pond beside the distillery and then into the River Spey eventually, it needs to be cooled down to normal kind of room temperature. Because if you put hot, bubbling water into the ecosystem, it's not going to be, you're going to get a large fine put on you by somebody. So so that's really what those are. But with our MVR kind of engineering works that are going on at the moment on site, we're trying to capture some of that heat, so that just means that the cooling towers aren't going to be used as much as possible, because that heat's going to be going back into the site and we're going to kind of recycle and reuse that. So yes, that's really for that. That's what those, I think that's those two big kind of tall towers kind of beside where the casks are all kept is that's what those are. So so yeah, I think it's now time for last but by no means least,
Andrew, before we move on to the last sample, we have a tradition here in the group.
Cool.
I invite everyone to turn on their cameras and join us for just a second.
Cool.
We want to raise a glass to you for joining us for tonight and for spending your night with us, spending the evening with us.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
And just to say thank you for everyone making it tonight, and to you and to Sam and the folks at Impex for making this possible. So just want to say cheers and thank you. We wish you all the best, and we hope to continue this tradition of revisiting you guys and tasting your newest products and just following along with all these amazing experiences you guys are doing. And I'm doing way too much talking to drag my feet to let Jason and Tim jump on camera too, but I guess they're not paying attention. Slackers. But yeah, everyone raise a glass and smile to your camera, please. Cheers. Got it.
Cool. So yeah, so that's time for last but by no means least, the final one, and that is you always hope with any kind of tasting lineup is always going to be something a little bit special, and this one is very special single cask that was bottled for Impex. So this is one that is only found in kind of from limited kind of retailers in the in the USA. It's an ex-bourbon 2014, so 10-year-old ex-bourbon single cask, which is something quite unique with us. So only 300 bottles was the outturn of this. ABV over 60.2. So pretty high, but that's what you want from a cask strength whiskey. And the great thing about these, but the bad thing about these is that once they're gone, they're gone. So if you see this out and about, then I would say grab a bottle of it, because usually they don't hang around for kind of too long. So I mean, give the whiskey, give it a taste, see what you think. And I'll just tell you a little bit of the background about where the single casks kind of where they come from, what the process is. So single casks, we call them almost the golden eggs on site. These are the kind of the best of the best that when we're sampling, and the warehouse team are sampling these, they are, something jumps out, they put them to one side, and then Billy comes and looks at them and goes, "Oh, there's something interesting going on, something different going on," which is always kind of really, again, that's part of the fun. So we don't bottle a huge amount at all worldwide for single casks, so I would say less than a handful get shipped to the US, for example, every single year. So if you see something in the grey boxes, as they're known as, they're kind of the best of the best. They kind of meet kind of Billy's kind of approval. And the way that we do it is that we will speak to the importer, we'll speak to Sam and the guys at Impex and see maybe what they might be interested in, and we'll send some samples to them that Billy's looked at. But then also, we can't dictate what a market wants, what they don't want. That's up to you guys to make your feelings known to the importer, but also we like to include the importer distributors into that decision-making process. So they'll sit down and look at maybe a few different samples and see which one maybe works the best for that. And that's really where that kind of the background kind of comes from with that. And and I would say with any kind of single cask where it is where it's bourbon as well is great, because there's no influence of your sherry, other styles of virgin oak, or your other styles of wine, that type of thing. It's a pretty pure kind of whiskey, and especially it's not that common to find a Scotch whiskey that's fully matured in bourbon as well. So I think as well, I know some people and they think that bourbon is just used as it's just filler for just the bourbon industry is only there for the casks to be used in the Scotch industry, but that's not true at all. There's some absolutely cracking kind of bourbons out there, but with this is basically spent, as I said, it's 10 years old, but this will have spent its life in two different styles of bourbon cask. We've started off in the initial cask that we would have had when we bought the distillery, and then we will have seen that this has maybe been a little bit different and maybe stood out a little bit differently and kept an eye on, and then we'll have put this into a bourbon cask that we'll have bought from, I'm 95% sure, from Heaven Hill, and put it back into there for probably about another 5 years, and just let it take its time. And that's the great thing about bourbon barrels, is you can put your whiskey in there and you're not gonna spoil it or overcook it after a couple of years. You know that it can take its time. But with this as well, only being 10 years old, that's not a bad thing at all. But again, with a single cask, sometimes I say if you have a very old single cask, you run the risk of it becoming too woody. It's overaged, and you're paying a lot of money, but you're also could be sometimes quite disappointing. But with this, it's not that. It's young, it's vibrant. Again, Jason, you said it there. You could be Billy's blender with him. It's honey vanilla. That's what you're getting. But I would say with on paper, if somebody told you there's going to be a GlenAllachie bourbon single cask, 10 years old, straight away in your head, you're thinking of honey, you're thinking of vanilla, you're thinking it's going to be strong, it's going to be bold. And this kind of ticks the boxes. And yeah, with that, after finished with that, those kind of, whether that's pepper notes, that again, ginger, cinnamon coming through, that's what you want in there. So I think there's been, just in the comments on the side, and I'm seeing a good few nods in people's screens. So hopefully this is one that's kind of ticking the boxes. So, but also I think on this, and with the way that we do our single casks, I would say with this is that there's some markets I look after. With me, I look after our markets in North America, so Canada, America, and some markets in Asia, so Taiwan, Korea, China, Hong Kong, and over there, bourbon single casks, there's not a market really for them there. It's not up to their standards, but their palate, it's much more sherry driven focused. So I always quite like it how you kind of work with the market and bring something to the market that is that's kind of made for them. So obviously America's built on bourbon, the success of bourbon, so it's nice for us to showcase something like this that has the best of both worlds, best of your bourbon notes, but also with your GlenAllachie spirit coming in as well. So I think it'd be interesting to hear if you guys have any other feedbacks on the bourbon cask at all. But also, as it's whiskey number 6 as well, it should be kind of ticking the boxes. I would say you've had 5 whiskeys to warm up to get to this, so, and even a couple more if you've had a couple sneaky ones as well. So
Well, Andrew, I look forward to seeing you in Scotland. I'll be there for the Speyside Festival doing articles and news and blogging of the whole festival. So
Cool, great. Well, I said, Lizzie, I'll be there. The company will be there for the whole week. So I would say beforehand, give me a message, and then we can, if you want, arrange a time. You can come to the site. Obviously, it's a busy time, but let me know your kind of plans. And we can meet up. I would say speak to Vadim or speak to Sam at Impex, and then they can pass on my details. And then give me a shout, and we'll see you. We'll see you there. So look forward to it.
okay,
And
thank you.
and I would say on that as well, with any of you guys, if you are ever coming to Scotland, come to Speyside, give the guys at Impex a shout, give us a shout, and we will happily look after you and give the visitor centre team a special heads up to know that there's some kind of VIPs coming along. So, on that one, it's I hope you've enjoyed kind of the final whiskey. I know somebody said there, too much bourbon for my taste, which again, that's no. I'm not going to disagree with you there. Again, it's everyone's individual. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm saying that one. If you maybe again with the whiskey, if you give it a couple of drops of water, as I've said, but even put an ice cube in there, let the ice cube sit and let it kind of melt away. I'm not here to dictate what you can and can't do and what you can and can't drink. So, but
the high alcohol content on here makes adding water sort of a kind of a safe bet, if you will. And so
exactly.
The person who's thinking it's too much bourbon, I recommend putting different amounts of water in and seeing if you can find a sweet spot that you're happy with this. Because it was too harsh at the beginning because everything else was so smooth. And then I tried a little bit of water. It wasn't enough. A little bit more water. It was like, wow, this is a different whiskey altogether.
Yeah.
So play with it. Yeah.
That's what it's funny you said. My mum at home, she will sometimes, if she has a cast strength whiskey, she'll start off with it and then she'll enjoy it and then she'll add a bit of water to see how it changes and keep adding water. She says it's amazing because the whiskey never vanishes because your glass just stays the same size even you keep drinking it. So she thinks it's marvelous. So
no kid, I mean I'm totally with you. My first sip I was just kind of, oh my god, I don't care for this at all. Added water, and now it's been sitting with water. It definitely got better, but to me I still like some of the other ones better.
Yeah, again, that's no right or wrong answer with that one, Henrik. So
it would be boring if we all like the same stuff.
Yeah, that's what I think. I've only maybe had one or two where you go to a tasting or a master class on an event like this, and you ask people what their favorites are. Then you ask them which one. And generally, with a GlenAllachie lineup, there's always going to be a votes for kind of each single different one. What you don't want is everyone to put their hand up for the oldest whiskey or the most expensive whiskey. That's not what you want at all. And that's sometimes you get people like that, but that's sometimes the case. You can't win them all. So
I also to it, and I thought the first sip was a little spicy. It had all the but it was the alcohol kind of punches, but then a bottle cap of water added to it, and now it's just like creamy. It's almost like there's half and half in this. It's so creamy and sweet and delicious. It's almost like drinking a milkshake. Back to what Jordan was saying. It's so so vanilla-y.
No, it's though I hope you guys enjoyed the last whiskey, but also the kind of lineup tonight. It's always, I would say, an idea of a good sign of a good tasting is we've been here for best part of 2 hours now and it's gone like that, and that's always a good sign. It's nothing worse if you quickly talk about the whiskies and then after 20 minutes you've got nothing to talk about. So no, I hope I've not bored you guys too much at all, but no, I really appreciate you guys your kind of input as well, your kind of questions and pointers as well on the comment section as well. It's always good to, no two tastings are ever the same, and it's always good to hear your guys' kind of viewpoints and feedback. So and again, Vadim, thanks a lot for putting this on. It's I would say in the future we're happy to help and do something else down the line. Something, I think, just top of my head, I was thinking something along the lines of a Miko Tor, something like that is doing like that's the ideas of
it doesn't
ideas of a
matter
fund.
what
So
it is, but we need your mom to join us.
there we go. Okay. You'll have to send her lots of whiskey for that. Whiskey and red wine, she'll be happy. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, just for me, no, thank you guys. Good to see some familiar faces on screen. So good to see some of you. And yeah, as I said, hopefully look forward to either seeing you in Scotland this year or over in America. I'll be over a few times this year. So hopefully I will be able to get a chance to catch up with you there. So, but no, thank you for that. And again, any feedback or so that you have, or again, questions, give us a shout, speak to Vadim, speak to Sam or the guys at Impex, and we will do our best to answer your questions, but also kind of look after you as well. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. We all
no
voted
worries.
for our favorite of the night. You want to guess what the favorite was?
Okay. Probably I'm thinking the 15-year-old GlenAllachie 15 or the 8-year-old Scottish Oak.
All right. The results are in, and the winner is
We'll go.
50% voted for the 15-year.
Cool.
It is a
Nice.
favorite. But exactly like you said, there's a vote for all the other ones as well. So
yeah, nice. And it's always a shame with any lineup when you have the first whiskey, because sometimes that's the one that people kind of almost forget about kind of straight away. So
revisit it. It's actually really good. I went back to it after the third or fourth pour, and I was like, wow, there's just so much complexity there with all the different casks that are used that it's really good.
No, there is. No, definitely. But no, thank you guys. No, I appreciate it again. And no, I look forward to doing events soon like this or seeing you in person. So
Awesome.
Cheers for that. Cheers, guys.
Have a good night. Night.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.